Ben is the Director of Operations for the state of Arizona and a lifelong public servant who has spent his career helping the government use data, technology, and continuous improvement to be a force for good. Before his current role at the governor's office, he has served as Deputy Budget Director for the state of Colorado, Chief Operating Officer for the Arizona Department of Education, and in Economic Development for the city of Phoenix. Fun fact, Ben's grandfather graduated from Harvard in the 1930s. We tried to get his portrait in here, but they didn't have it ready in time, so maybe for the second annual. We were so excited to have him back representing the Henderson family on campus today. Please join me in welcoming Ben Henderson.
Morning. So my name's Ben. I'm the COO of the state of Arizona. I'm on my fourth governor. I hopped back and forth between Arizona and Colorado a little bit. So I've worked for the Republican Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona, and then I worked for Governor Hickenlooper and Governor Polis in Colorado. And I'm lucky enough to be back in my home state working for Governor Hobbs. I got a budget background, so you'll see like numbers and charts and stuff because that's my angle, and I'm not a technologist. But one of the big questions I want to ask you all is whether or not government is actually ready for all of these changes. I work in a state where government's kind of the enemy. We hear this all the time. The community doesn't like the government, they want less of it. We were talking about government innovation a moment ago, and Arizona likes to brag about being innovative in all these spaces, and one of the big ones that, when people come to town, they're really interested in our self-driving cars. We were the first state to allow self-driving cars. You can take it to the airport, you can take it to the mall, you can take it to the movie theaters, all these things. And I remember sitting in the room with Governor Ducey when they said, if we're the first state to allow this, we will also be the first state where a death happens from an automated vehicle, and are you ready for that? And that level of risk and that kind of thinking, I think, defines how Arizona moves forward in innovation. Mostly our capacity is shrinking. So since 2002, the population in Arizona has grown 38%, and the state workforce has shrunk 10%. Something that Republicans like to brag about. This is like a feature, not a flaw kind of thing, They're very proud that we're doing more with less over and over and over and over. There was a big debate a couple of years ago about whether or not we were 48th in education funding or 51st in education funding, and that took up months of legislative. Right? So that's where Arizona is at, right? Smaller is better, less is more, almost always. If our general fund kept up with our GDP and personal income, we'd have $3 billion more on our $18 billion denominator to invest in things like social services. And so AI is a good opportunity for us to start thinking about how we can actually do more with less. Governor Ducey was a businessman. He's famous for Cold Stone Creamery. And he brought in all of his business thinking from Cold Stone Creamery, literally to a T. There's this pyramid of success. And we have a pyramid of government success. Cold Stone is very different than government. But nonetheless, he wanted to implement lean management, right? So where Arizona is at today, and I want to talk about the operational capacity and structure of government, we did lean management system process improvement for a decade, all that city stat stuff that we were talking about. We did that as innovative in 2015, about 15 years after kind of broke government in his city stat model. And so you can see some of the really amazing increases and improvements in some of the numbers we did in 2015 to 2018 timeframe. Hotline abandonment rate call from 32% to 2%. We have increased net revenues of 53% to beneficiaries from our lottery. We have a 178% increase in life-saving naloxone distribution. There's two things I want to say about this slide. One is the reason we show them in percents is because we were doing so bad before. It's not that hard to do better when you're doing so poorly to begin with, and so to show that percentage increase is a big thing. The other thing is this whole model was about speed, right? It was go faster. It wasn't make people's lives better, it was go faster. And that was the kind of fundamental core of what we tried to do in Arizona, was make our processes, make licensing times and permit times and MVD times, which are now below 20 minutes all across the state. That was the goal, faster, 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 faster. So Governor Hobbs challenged us to do something a little different. She's the first social worker ever elected governor in our country's history, which I think is pretty cool. So faster is not her mentality. Her mentality is care and well-being, right? And so when you start to put people at the center of all this stuff and start to say, like, how does the world actually get better? How does government actually make the world better? The Governor Hobbs would like to make our approach people-centered. So I'm going to talk about that here, about what that actually means. So in performance and planning, we have kind of this mindset about, 200 people all trained in lean process improvement, all trying to come up with their strategic plans that are like, go fast. Right? So when we talk about building out a new capacity structure, where I spend most of my time is trying to build the tools and the teams that will actually get us beyond that, so we can start talking about outcomes, impact, and less about speed. And so the Government Transformation Office, which is really the like lean process improvement team, was created in 2012 under former Governor Brewer. We've had a budget office since the 1990s and things like that, which is kind of late, to be honest, for such things. The two new offices we created just in the last couple of years, with the Digital Solutions Office. I know we're going to talk a little bit about digital services here in a moment. So this is really about thinking about human-centered design, agile approach, agile procurement, agile budget. Those are the two things that we struggle with more than I think the actual building and deployment of technology. And just this year, we created for the first time a state data governance organization. So we start to care about how good our data is, because we don't really know. We don't look, we don't care. When the public record request comes in, there's some like paralegal who's churning out numbers and then providing the public, and that's about as much reflection on our own data as we do in Arizona today, partially because of our capacity problems. And so, I just wanted to talk about this because I think you're going to hear a lot about the teams and the tools and the capacity the rest of the day. But we are trying to get government to be a place where we're constantly iterating and experimenting to make more impact. And that means asking the right questions and setting us up for success. So when you say impact where, Governor Hobbs and her policy team have created what is 30 or so long-term outcomes. About 10 years down the road, the entire economy, right, should be experiencing these kinds of things. So we know government fits in this model, but is not the whole thing. So for example, we have a goal in here for 500,000 new jobs by 2030. Depending on which government you go to, economic development can get you about 6% to 12% of that number based on my experience in a couple states. So we're not going to turn to our economic development cabinet member and say, hey, how close to 500,000 are you? But their analysis, their investments, their programs can get us to about 25,000, and so that's their performance measure. And so we try to track along these things. But the problem really is that like this side of the screen didn't exist in Arizona for a long time, right? It was just things like this. How much faster can you go? Can you reduce those processing times? Can you make customer experience a little bit better? And we stopped asking ourselves whether or not it was actually making the world a better place, and whether or not healthcare jobs were coming in the way that we needed them to come into the state, where we're 90,000 short of where we should be today. And mostly that is not doctors. Mostly that is like frontline workers, bedpans, behavioral health techs, things like that. And so, how are you building your plans according to the outcomes? And that's the question we ask our teams a lot. And it leads to kind of our technology approach. So the last slide was kind of a mock-up that I made in my first week on the job, and I said, this is where we're going. And so we finally now have some of the data flowing in a way that it didn't before. This is our city stat model, right? So we now connect our outcomes and our progress towards things. And so we have a goal to reduce traffic fatalities in the state. We can't say Vision Zero because it's a politically laden term in the state of Arizona. We had a big legislative fight about our transportation director got grilled about why she thought highways were racist. Can't even begin to. Anyway, so we don't do Vision Zero. We have a 20% reduction in traffic fatalities. And you can see where the Department of Transportation is starting to work on things. We have an Office of Highway Safety. Even our Game and Fish Department is contributing to that with some wildlife crossings we're building in rural parts of town. It is the #1 way to reduce when cars hit deer and elk, especially in northern Arizona, where we have the largest ponderosa pine forest in the country. But the whole idea is that you have all these silos and all these agencies and all these teams doing their data projects, doing their AI, doing their tech, doing their performance, doing their city stat, and they never really come together to understand impact and how their various pieces are actually affecting the overall number. And so that's the system we built for that. Okay, so all those metrics are not people-centered. So I talk a lot about trying to change our performance management mindset to be more people-centered. So here's an example. Our Department of Education, which we don't control because of a separate statewide elected office, but they wanted to do an anti-bullying program. And so we said, okay, what's a good metric that you can have? Like, how are you going to hold yourself accountable to making sure that you're getting that done? And they said, oh, we're going to make it. From 0 to 100%, we'll have a curriculum. Okay, it's a good start. But then, to get a little bit better, we're challenging them to think about, okay, now that you've made the curriculum, where is the uptake, right? Which schools are actually using that curriculum? And then challenging them in year 3 to think, okay, of the schools that have adopted the curriculum, what % of students are reporting that the curriculum is working, right? I had a mentor once say that, the whole world is really only 2 things: plan the work, work the plan. And the third one that I think he was missing is the plan working? And so this is something you can imagine, even if you didn't have these measures at all, if you just had this measure, what % of students are reporting bullying over and over and over again? The questions and the teams inside government actually shift. You stop worrying about this, and you stop worrying about this, and you actually start to focus on what the #1 way to have impact in the world is. Because, especially in Arizona, most people believe that programs make things worse. Actually getting rid of programs, getting rid of technology, getting rid of bureaucrats actually would make our numbers much better. And so that's kind of the question is where in our bureaucratic system are things working or not? Okay, this is the stuff I bet you're all interested in. We also want to make people-centered approaches in our process and in our technology. So I'm going to talk about a couple things we've already done. Then I want to ask some questions at the end just about the bare bones basics, because as fancy and amazing as we can think about like one people city hall, I worry about the stuff that's going to happen between now and then. Form frenzy. Have you all been part of a form frenzy effort in a government? Yeah, so this is kind of going around. This is kind of a fad right now. So one of the things we did is tell every state agency to pick a form. You all have forms. They're long. They're cumbersome. Our parks form still referenced Polaroids, and I kid you not, we had someone in the room ask what a Polaroid was. So, making forms better is important. It's people-centered. We just did this one year. We eliminated 226 questions across 36 forms. Every single form we're measuring comes back half as time-bound on the customer as it used to, and 20% of the time they're coming in complete and accurate on the first time, which is, rework and preventing that capacity problem I'm talking about. And don't they look happy? It actually is one of my most proud projects because they loved it. Public servants love when they feel like they can make their lives better. The employee engagement on allowing them to take all the structures and things that feel like they can't ever change. Right? We talked about this. Heat. So heat is one I'm really proud of. And this is what we're partnering with Roundtable on as well. We had the most extreme heat ever on recorded history this past summer. We also did the summer before that. We also did the summer before that. We had the longest stretch of days over 110 in any place in the country in recorded history. For the months, for half of June, all of July, all of August, and a couple days in September, we were all over 110. The society doesn't really prepare for heat in the way you might expect for cold weather. People burn their hands when they grab accessible railings for wheelchairs. We had a death rate that increased sevenfold just in the last 5 years from people dying of heat. When people fall on the sidewalk, they get 3rd-degree burns and have to go to our specialized burn unit. Phoenix has some work to do. Arizona has some work to do. So we're doing a whole bunch of work in heat and around heat, and one of the things I'm super proud of, the former administration spent $300 million putting up shipping containers along the southern border of the United States to keep, for security, to finish the wall that President Trump started building. There was a lawsuit, we had to pull those shipping containers down, there were about 2,000 of them. They're still sitting in a prison in Tucson, Arizona, although we sold 600 of the 2,000, and if anyone wants a shipping container, I got a great deal for you. But we have turned those shipping containers into mobile portable cooling centers that are solar powered, and we deploy those across the state where there's need. Those cooling centers and the cooling center network are now connected through technology, thanks to Civic Roundtable, where they are sharing best practices, tips and tricks, information about closing times, opening times, where there's resource needs, and that's really a network that didn't exist just 2 years ago. Libraries, museums, movie theaters, they've all signed up as part of our cooling center network. Yeah, see there, you can see that's what we used to have when we came into office, and the next slide shows what we turned it into, which is a lot more people-centered. We are working with Code for America on e-filing to help people pay their taxes at no cost, right? A bunch of states are doing this. It's expanding to about 1.5 more million taxpayers in Arizona this year. We're excited about that. Okay, this is an example of where we're currently at. If you look at who is experiencing homelessness in the state of Arizona, there's no one technology system that captures that information. People move in between southern Arizona, northern Arizona, central Arizona. Those 3 different IT systems, roughly, don't talk to each other. We don't know where the wait lists are long. We don't know where the needs are. And so we partnered with Georgetown, the Beck Center for Social Impact Innovation, and we're doing some data projects with a former Dukakis fellow of mine, Isaac Yoder, to build and connect some of that data. But that's where Arizona is. We're not at, getting to a place where we're automating the workflow. We're at a place of understanding what's going on. And that's my big concern, is that every question I go to, every data set I go to, every technologist I go to, is really just kind of working themselves raw, working 80 hours a week, scraping the bottom of the barrel. And AI can help a lot with that, but I also worry that we might not be fully ready for that. So that's where I need your help, and that's why I have a couple questions for you. Oh, I should have put this slide first. We are also building a one-stop shop to do entity management, identity management. So Ben Henderson in the education department and Ben Henderson in the social service department and Ben Henderson in the vital records department are all different Ben Hendersons. They don't talk, they're not unique identifiers. And even just understanding, hey, you just applied for benefits, which we had a problem for, especially in the unemployment insurance space for a while, with fraud during COVID. I have a cool thing I'm gonna show you at the end. You died, right? You're not a real person. We know that because there's this other data set over here in government, literally like 2 buildings away, that could have told you that, and we couldn't and can't connect it. And so in a state where you're there, how do you do AI? We are doing some cool things, right? So I do want to talk about that because I don't want it to all be doom and gloom. We are using machine learning and AI to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse in our access program. We had probably the largest case of Medicaid fraud, at least that I've ever seen in our country's history when we took office. $2 billion gone from a billing scam related to sober living homes, which are in Arizona an unlicensed entity. So anyone can open up a home, accept individuals who are going through some substance abuse problems in their life, and they can sit there in that home and receive services, and then that home can then bill Medicaid for $200, $400, you name it, an hour for 24 hours a day. Treatment for 24 hours a day. People are sleeping. That's not how this works. And they were mostly plaguing our indigenous communities. Our indigenous communities were well aware of this. White vans would drive around, embrace people who were usually experiencing homelessness, say, I have a bed for you, drive them down to Phoenix, put them in a bed, bill Medicaid at absurd rates, keep the profit. And we now have an AI model that is training against that fraud, is watching the billing codes, and we're very proud of that work. That one I'm more excited to talk about because I think it's where most of state government is. This is like the coolest thing ever, right? You go to like a monthly CIO roundtable in Arizona with all the agency CIOs, and they talk about this like it's the coolest thing ever. They also talk about, this is a big deal, robotic process automation, right? It's like old news. You guys ever done robotic process automation? It's AI before Gen AI. It loosely connects, random tasks over and over again, and connects those tasks over and over so you don't have to repeat yourself. In Arizona, we ask poor people how poor they are a lot. We shouldn't, but it's the law. And every time we ask them how poor they are, we make them take a drug test. And every time we make them take a drug test, some bureaucrat, public servant, spends 7 minutes connecting 4 different systems to understand the results of that drug test. And through robotic process automation, we took that from 7 minutes down to 38 seconds. Well, that times 29,000 notices a year across a couple different agencies actually created enough capacity for like what is equivalently 2 new people. Without ever having to ask the legislature, without more taxpayer dollars, we expanded the capacity of our team through robotic process automation. And the really cool thing that I want to talk about, that I'm most worried about, is what AI is going to do to government, not how government can use AI. So I want to give you an example. Let me go to the next slide. Oh, I should do that last. Go 2 slides forward. Okay, data visualization, right? Charts and graphs. Have you heard of data sonification? Okay, so I'm going to play you some beeps, and these beeps represent a human being who has lost their job and has come to the government for help. They need some bureaucrat to determine eligibility, to process an application, to confirm that the benefit is needed, to do the financial transaction. And I want you to see the throughput of 3 different times. This is Colorado data. My apologies. So 3 different times in Colorado's history that we experienced unemployment spikes. 2019 was an average year for unemployment insurance. You can imagine, if I were to play this, it'd be like beep, beep, right? That kind of pace. That's a human being. Hey. Yeah.
There you go.
Nice. So that's a human being trying to get access to a government program, right? 2009, peak of the housing crisis. So this is what was the most intense economic crisis that my generation experienced, that government had experienced, huge change in throughput. But here is the highest recorded unemployment rate in the history of ever, and this is what governments were experiencing in real time. Right? So think of the workers, think of the process, think of the applications that those frontline folks have to deal with when your call center is going off the chat like that. We now know that most of those, a decent proportion of those calls were not real, were fraud. But how could you prepare yourself as a government organization to accept that kind of throughput? And that's before AI. So think about an RFP, right? Put an RFP out there, you're hiring a vendor, and you get 7 responses. I think we should be prepared to get 700. When you do a grant proposal and you're looking to give money out to qualified, and all of a sudden all those community organizations are all using AI to build their grant proposals, and they all look very similar, and they all come in, how do you, as a government worker, start to evaluate all of that kind of information when literally throughput goes through the roof? And that's the stuff I'm worried about. As much as there's automation, I'm worried about the throughput. Yeah. Oh, yeah, truly hope. So this is the one we're just starting to work on, which is AI embedded into body cameras of our state troopers to do sentiment analysis. And this body camera will give that trooper in real time a professionalism score. And they can see that professionalism score to moderate their own behaviors and performance, but they also can give that data to their managers, and their managers can start to manage performance. And so this study, I think USC did it, shows the various changes in behavior of those troopers based on whether or not they have the ability to control their performance or their manager. I also worried and panicked about this a little bit in terms of how the legal liability, the data, use of force. We've seen use of force go down when we've used tools like this before in the past, but we'll have to navigate that as it rolls out. This goes live in a new chain. Thank you. I'm Ben. See you up there, son.